Good morning, everyone, or should I say good late morning. I'm a little behind schedule today. It's been a little crazy this morning, but every day is a little bit crazy. But guess what? I'm walking back on my favorite spot. I'm walking in sunshine. Yeah, it's a little overcast, but it's gorgeous. I thought what we would do is look real quick at the Old Testament lesson that's set up for this week, because it's paired beautifully with our gospel lesson that we talked about yesterday. Remember, we were talking about forgiveness. We only talked about part of the gospel lesson, Peter and his 70 times 7 episode with Jesus. But it was all about forgiveness, how forgiveness is forever. Hey, that's kind of a neat little thing. Forgiveness is forever. Well, at least that's the ideal. Not that that always happens, but that's the ideal for us as God's people. Well, let's get back to the Old Testament lesson. It's Joseph, one last time, announcing forgiveness to his brothers. Now, there's quite a backstory to this, but well, if you look at the book of Genesis, Genesis means beginnings. This is the book of beginnings, beginnings of the history of God's people. It's filled with tension between brothers right off the bat. In just a couple verses, Cain and Abel were born, and Cain kills Abel. Disagreement, they didn't get along. Bad news. A little bit later, you have Ishmael and Isaac getting into it, and they part ways. Jacob and Esau, right from the womb, Jacob is grabbing onto Esau. And now that is a story that ends with forgiveness. All right, but it took a while, and it was pretty touch and go at different parts. In fact, Jacob thought he was going to get killed by his brother Esau. And then finally, we have the story of Joseph and his brothers, and that's a long drawn out story in the book of Genesis, and it takes a while. But as we saw weeks ago, Joseph forgives his brothers. It's after he's down in Egypt, and he's a bigwig down there in Egypt, that his brothers come down and they beg for, well, they didn't beg for forgiveness. They came down to get food, and Joseph kind of plays around with them and messes with their heads because they don't recognize him. He recognizes them, and eventually he announces his forgiveness to them. But that's not the whole story. Let's go back just a little bit. Right after Joseph had been sold into slavery by his brothers, it was the Ishmaelites that brought Joseph down, and they sold him to a guy named Potiphar. Potiphar was kind of the bigwig of the Egyptian army, and so Joseph became his slave. But it says, the scriptures, that everything that Joseph did in Potiphar's household, it went very well. In fact, Potiphar prospered with Joseph as his servant, and pretty soon Potiphar put him in charge of everything, the whole household, everything he had, and it just kept getting better and better and better, and hey, it was working out to be a pretty good deal. Joseph was held in high esteem. Well, he was also held in high esteem by Potiphar's wife, who wanted to have a little fling with him. So Joseph said, I can't do that, come on. She kept going after him. Finally, one day, when they were both alone in the house, she grabbed his clothes and tore them off of him, and he ran out. And now she was kind of a little ticked off by all that, so she started screaming, rape, rape. Even though it didn't happen, you know what happens next. Joseph is thrown into prison. Well, it's while he's in prison, there are two other people in there who kind of fell out of favor with the Pharaoh, not with Potiphar, but with the Pharaoh, the cupbearer and the baker. And they had these really weird dreams. And they were kind of moping around one day in the prison, and Joseph said, well, what's wrong with you guys? Oh, we had these dreams and nobody can interpret them, and they're just driving us crazy. And so Joseph said, hey, that's God's job, my God's job. I can do that for you. And he interprets the dream of the cupbearer, that he would be restored to Pharaoh's household and once again be Pharaoh's cupbearer, be in his good graces. Now the baker overhears this and goes, hey, that's pretty cool. How about my dream? Joseph looks at the baker's dream and goes, well, yeah, you're going to be restored to the household of the Pharaoh too, but in a different way. He's going to stick your head up on a pole, and the birds of the air are going to eat at your flesh. Well, guess what? Both things came true. But just before they had gone back to the household of the Pharaoh, Joseph had asked the cupbearer, remember me now when you get there and tell Pharaoh all about it. Maybe I can get out of here. Well, the cupbearer forgot all about it. But it's years later that the Pharaoh's having all these weird dreams, and the cupbearer says, oh yeah, there was this dude back there. I think he was the captain of the guard's slave at one point. He interpreted dreams for us. Pharaoh brings him in, and before you know it, Joseph is back in Pharaoh's household. Interpreted the dream of remember the 7 lean cows and the 7 fat cows, and then there was also the 7 kind of crummy ears of corn and the 7 really good ears of corn. Man, that's making me hungry. I just had some corn on the cob last week. I need some more. All right, back to our story. He interprets those dreams about the coming famine. So the Pharaoh puts him in charge. Everything goes hunky-dory, and before you know it, Joseph is basically the most powerful person in Egypt outside of the Pharaoh. Okay, that's the whole backstory. So then you had the story that we talked about with Jacob sending his boys down to Egypt to see if he can buy some food because they're all starving up there back home. And long story short, Joseph ends up revealing himself to his brothers. They have a cry fest, and Joseph forgives them, says, hey, bring Dad and all the family down. I'll set you up here. And he does. They're all set up in the land of Goshen, and they prospered. See, the land of Goshen was prime territory, prime real estate in the Nile Valley. Joseph gave them the best land, and they did prosper as a people. They did very well for themselves. But our story for today is at the very end. Now, Joseph, his father, and his brother's father, Jacob, passes away. He's buried. And now the brothers are going, oh man, you know how this all started, don't you? The first thing Joseph, when he revealed himself to us, asked was, how's Dad? That's all he cared about was Dad. Now Dad's dead. Do you think he's still going to forgive us? Is he going to forget about it and get even with us now? Well, Joseph, once again, proved that he was a man of his word, a man of honor. And he said, listen, God intended this for good. What you did wasn't naughty. It was not a good thing. But God used it to save his people. I still forgive you. And they had another cry fest. And that pretty much ends the story of Joseph. It is interesting. It is interesting that once again, we have this incredible story of forgiveness. And it goes to show that forgiveness is not just something that is New Testament stuff. It is the Older Testament, the Hebrew Scripture stuff. It is literally scattered all through the Hebrew Scriptures, especially when we get to the prophets. Oh yeah, the prophets, they announce some gloom and doom scenarios because the people are kind of asking for it. And it's a consequence of their sins, all right? It's a consequence of their sin. But on the other side of any death and destruction that happens, there's hope. There's the promise of renewal, the promise of God never leaving them, and God's grace, well, His steadfast love and mercy endures forever. Yep. But it all starts right back here. First book of the Bible, the book of beginnings, the book of Genesis, and it comes to a great ending as Genesis comes to an end. Oh yeah, because right after Genesis is Exodus, right? The story of the release of the people who later on had been enslaved in Egypt, and there's a whole new covenant established between God and his people, which is actually part 2 of the story. But it all begins with Joseph. Oh, well, have a great day. Look at the sunshine just shining right through on my sunshine on my shoulder. That's a song. I should get that written someday. God's blessings be with you. Have an awesome day. And remember, God's forgiveness is forever. Blessings be with you.